Who is she? Whispered Ada. I don't know, replied Amaka. But she looks different. I've never seen her before. I wonder why she doesn't speak to anyone, mused Chief Obinna. Is unlike anyone we have ever had in Ekenna. Maybe she has a dark past, suggested Uche the farmer. Do you smell that? Asked Amaka. What are you selling? Said Ned. It's stew. Would you like to try some? Oluchi replied. Everyone come and try this, oh! Everyone come and try this, oh! Nneka exclaimed. We are here once again for another intriguing story of the fat mysterious food vendor from Twice Sweet African Folktales. Sit back and be entertained. In the heart of a lush green valley lay the peaceful village of Ekenna. Known for its calm and serene environment, the villagers lived in harmony, their days filled with laughter and their evenings with the warmth of communal fires. The sound of children playing, farmers working, and women singing as they cooked filled the air. One warm evening, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the village, Oluchi, a stranger, arrived. She was a fat black woman, dressed in a bright flowing dress that billowed around her as she walked. Her face was stern, her eyes sharp, and she carried an air of mystery that immediately caught the villagers' attention. Who is she? Whispered Ada, a young girl, to her friend Amaka as they watched the woman from a distance. I don't know, replied Amaka, her eyes wide with curiosity. But she looks different. I've never seen her before. The woman settled in a small abandoned hut on the outskirts of the village. She did not speak to anyone, nor did she ask for any help. She simply moved in, unpacked her belongings, and shut the door. The villagers, known for their hospitality, were taken aback by her aloofness. Good evening, ma, greeted Nneka, the village midwife, as she approached the hut the next morning. Welcome to Ekenna. Do you need any help? The woman glanced at Nneka, but said nothing. She simply shook her head and went back inside, leaving Nneka standing there puzzled. Days turned into weeks, and the woman remained a mystery. She was seen early in the morning, fetching water from the stream, and late at night, tending to a small garden she had started behind her hut. But she spoke to no one and participated in none of the village activities. I wonder why she doesn't speak to anyone, mused Chief Obinna during a village meeting. It's unlike anyone we have ever had in Ekenna. Maybe she has a dark past, suggested Uche the farmer. Or perhaps she's just shy. Rumors began to spread. Some said she's a witch. Others thought she was mourning the loss of her family. But no one knew for sure. The children were both scared and intrigued, often daring each other to go near her hut. Early one morning, Oluchi decided to cook a large pot of stew. The rich aroma of spices and herbs filled her small hut and soon spread throughout the village. The villagers, drawn by the mouth-watering smell, began to wonder what Oluchi was up to. Do you smell that? Asked Amaka, pausing her chores and taking a deep breath. Yes, replied Ada, her eyes wide with curiosity. I wonder what she's cooking. Later that day, Oluchi made her way to the village market, carrying several pots of her stew. She set up a small store and began ladling out portions into bowls. Initially, a few villagers approached her stall, hesitant but intrigued by the delicious smell. Good day, ma, said Nneka. eyeing the steaming pot. What are you selling? It's stew, replied Oluchi with a smile. Would you like to try some? Nneka nodded, and Oluchi handed a bowl. As soon as Nneka took the first bite, her eyes lit up in delight. This is amazing, she exclaimed. Everybody come and try this, sir. Everybody come and try this. Word spread quickly, and soon a crowd had gathered around Oluchi's stall. People were jostling and pushing, eager to get a taste of the mysterious woman's stew. The line grew longer and longer, with villagers impatiently waiting their turn. A strange woman who just arrived at a land suddenly starts selling extraordinary. What could possibly be wrong? The villagers couldn't get enough of her delicious stew, and they kept coming back for more. The market buzzed with excitement, and soon people were fighting to get to the front of the land. Despite the chaos, Oluchi remained calm, serving each customer with a gentle smile. By the end of the day, every pot was empty, and the villagers were left amazed and satisfied. As the sun set and the market began to clear, Oluchi packed up her stall and headed back to her hut. The villagers were still talking about her stew, their taste buds, enchanted by the flavors Oluchi had made her mark on the village of Ekenna, and the mystery surrounding her only deepened. Who is this woman? Murmured Ada to Amaka as they walked home. And how does she make such magical food? I don't know, replied Amaka, her mind racing with questions, but I hope she cooks again soon. The next day, the market was abuzz with talk of Oluchi's stew. The other food sellers, who had watched in disbelief as their regular customers flocked to her store, gathered early in the morning, whispering and casting suspicious glances in her direction. This is impossible, murmured Mama Chinyere, a seasoned food vendor. How can someone new sell so well on their first day? I lost all my customers yesterday, grumbled Papeze, staring at a pot of stew. They all went to her. Mama Nkechi, who sold jollof rice, nodded in agreement. There must be something in her food. It's not natural. As Oluchi arrived at the market with her pot of stew, the other vendors watched her closely. They noticed how quickly the villagers gathered around her stall, eagerly waiting for their share. It's happening again, said Mama Chinyere, frustration evident in her voice. What are we going to do? We can't let her ruin our business, Papa Eze replied. We need to find out her secret. Mama Nkechi approached Oluchi's stall, feigning friendliness. Good morning, Oluchi, she said with a forced smile. Your stew was quite popular yesterday. What's your secret? Oluchi looked at Mama Nkechi with a mixture dread and anger, but she managed to keep cool. Mama Nkechi narrowed her eyes. Are you sure there is nothing else? No special herbs or spices? Oluchi shook her head. No, Oluchi replied coldly. Unsatisfied with the answer, Mama Nkechi returned to the other vendors. She's hiding something, she whispered. We need to keep an eye on her. The food vendors decided to band together, determined to uncover the truth. They watched Oluchi's every move, hoping to catch a glimpse of her secret ingredient or technique. But no matter how hard they tried, they found nothing out of the ordinary. Or maybe she's using juju, Mama Chinyere said, her voice low. We should be careful. Despite their suspicions, the vendors couldn't deny the impact Oluchi was having on the market. Their sales continued to drop as more and more villagers chose her stew over their offerings. The frustrations grew, and tensions rose among the once harmonious community. Every day, Oluchi, now fondly known as Madam Cook, continued to bring her delectable stew to the market. The villagers eagerly awaited her arrival, forming long lines before she set up her stall. Her fame had spread beyond Ekenna, attracting customers from neighboring villages who came to taste the magical stew everyone was talking about. Good morning, Madam Cook, greeted Nneka, one of her regular customers, with a bright smile. I brought my sister from the next village to taste your stew. Good morning, Nneka, Oluchi replied, serving a generous portion of stew. I'm glad you could bring her along. Enjoy. The market burst with excitement as more and more people crowded around her stall. The other vendors watched in envy as their stalls remained largely ignored. She's selling out every day, Mama Chinyere said, shaking her head. I don't understand it. People are coming from all over just for her food. Papeze added, frustration evident in his voice. What makes her stew so special? As the days went by, the influx of customers grew. The villagers of Ekanna took pride in Madam Cook, but the other vendors were left struggling to keep their businesses afloat. Some tried to replicate her stew, using similar ingredients and techniques, but none could capture the unique flavor of Oluchi's cooking. She must be doing something we can't see, murmured Mama Nkechi, stirring her pot of jollof rice. It's not just about the ingredients. Despite the growing tension among the vendors, Oluchi remained oblivious to their discontent. She continued to cook with the same love and care, greeting each customer with a warm smile and a kind word. Your stew is the best I've ever tasted, said a man from the neighboring village, handing Oluchi a few coins. I've traveled far just to buy it. Thank you, Oluchi replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. I'm happy you enjoyed it. As Oluchi packed up her store at the end of the day, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her purse were empty and her customers were satisfied. While the villagers of Ekenna and beyond marveled at Madame Cook's delicious stew, none suspected the dark secret behind her extraordinary success. Unbeknownst to everyone, Oluchi's stew contained a secret ingredient that she kept hidden from the world. Each morning, before heading to the market, Oluchi followed a peculiar ritual. When she felt the urge to urinate, she would do so in a small container. The container held the secret of her charm, her own urine. She would later use this liquid in the preparation of her famous stew. One evening, after another day of selling out her stew, Oluchi sat in her small hut, reflecting on her success. She smiled to herself, knowing that her secret was safe. If they only knew, she murmured, shaking her head, but they will never find out. The next morning, Oluchi went about her usual routine. She collected her urine in the container and carefully set it aside. She then began preparing her stew, mixing the usual ingredients with the secret liquid. As the aroma of her cooking filled the air, Oluchi hummed a tune. She knew that the villagers would soon be lining up at her stall, eager for a taste of her magical stew. At the market, the crowd was already gathering. Nneka, one of Oluchi's regular customers, chatted with a friend while they waited. Have you ever tasted anything like her stew? Nneka asked, licking her lips in anticipation. Never, her friend replied. I wonder what her secret is. As Oluchi set up her store, the other vendors watched her closely, still trying to uncover her secret. Mama Chinyere and Papa Eze exchanged glances, frustrations etched on their faces. We need to find out what she's doing. Mama Chinyere whispered to Papeze. It's driving me crazy. Papeze nodded. I know, but we have to be careful. If she finds out we are watching, she will be more secretive. Despite their efforts, the vendors couldn't get close enough to see Oluchi's preparations. She worked quickly and efficiently, serving bowl after bowl to her eager customers. As the day wore on, the crowd at Oluchi's stall grew larger. People from neighboring villages continued to pour in, all wanting a taste of the famous stew. The other vendors could only watch in dismay as their stalls remained mostly empty. There's something not right about this, Mama Nkechi muttered to herself, stirring her pot of jollof rice. We need to find out what it is. As the sun began to set and the market started to clear, Oluchi packed up her store and headed home. She felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that her secret remained undiscovered. Back in her hut, Oluchi carefully cleaned her cooking utensils and prepared for the next day's market. She glanced at the container of urine and smiled to herself. Tomorrow will be another successful day, she said softly, her eyes gleaming with determination. Every morning at precisely 9 a.m., Madam Cook would arrive at the market, pushing her cart laden with steaming pots of stew. By then, a long line of eager customers will already be waiting for her, chattering excitedly among themselves. Here she comes, shouted Nneka, pointing as Oluchi approached. I can't wait to get my hands on that stew. Me too, replied Chika, her friend. It's worth the wait. Oluchi greeted her customers with a warm smile, setting up her stall with practiced efficiency. She began serving bowl after bowl of her famous stew, the rich aroma wafting through the market. As the clock struck 12 noon, Oluchi followed her usual routine. She closed her store temporarily, much to the disappointment of her waiting customers. Why does she always close at noon? Wondered Uche, a regular customer. But she always comes back with that black container. While the villagers speculated, Oluchi disappeared into a narrow alleyway behind the market. She carried her small black container, her secret companion. For the next 15 minutes, she would be out of sight, leaving her customers curious and impatient. Do you think that container has something to do with her stew? Asked Mama Nkechi, whispering to Mama Chinyere. It must, replied Mama Chinyere. But what could it be? We need to find out. Oluchi returned to her store exactly 15 minutes later. As always, the black container was now carefully hidden beneath her cart. She resumed serving her stew, the line of customers quickly reforming. As the day drew close, Oluchi packed up her store, her secret still safe. She walked home, the black container intact, confident that no one would ever discover the real ingredient behind her extraordinary stew. Every time Madame Cook returned to her store with a black container, she followed a peculiar routine. She would carefully open the container and pour its ingredients into her stew, stirring it thoroughly. Her customers, unaware of the secret ingredients, continued to line up eagerly for a taste of her magical stew. Look at her, Mama Nkechi whispered to Mama Chinyere, watching Oluchi from a distance. She does it every day at noon. I know, Mama Chinyere replied. There is something in that container that makes her stew special. We need to find out what it is. The other food sellers grew increasingly curious and frustrated. They couldn't understand why Oluchi always left her store at exactly 12 noon and how she managed to attract so many customers. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't replicate her success. One afternoon, Mrs. Clara, a determined and a brave food seller, decided to uncover the truth about Madame Cook's mysterious routine. She decided to make the worst decision of her life by trailing Madame Cook. At exactly 12 noon, Oluchi closed her store and headed off as usual, carrying her black container. Mrs. Clara discreetly followed, keeping a safe distance so as not to be noticed. She quickly moved, but quietly, her heart pounding with anticipation. As Oluchi wandered through the market and into the narrow alleyway, Mrs. Clara stayed on her trail. She watched as Oluchi walked confidently, seemingly unaware of the eyes following her. The path led them away from the busy market and towards the outskirts of the village. Oluchi approached a small, modest house at the edge of the village. Mrs. Clara's eyes widened as she realized this was Madame Cook's home. Madame Cook arrived home, her steps heavy with satisfaction from a successful day at the market. She carried the black container carefully, as if it were precious. Mrs. Clara, having followed her discreetly, watched from a distance, trying to remain unseen. Oluchi entered her house and went straight to the back door, leading to the backyard. She walked with papers, oblivious to Mrs. Clara's quiet approach behind her. Mrs. Clara kept a safe distance, her eyes focused on the black container Oluchi was holding. As Oluchi reached the backyard, she placed the container on a small table near a garden shed. She looked around, seemingly to ensure she was alone. Mrs. Clara, hidden behind a large bush, held her breath and started peeping at her. Oluchi unfastened her clothing and squatted over the container. The sound of her urination hitting the container was faint but clear to Mrs. Clara. She could barely contain her shock as she watched the dark liquid filled in the container. This can't be real, Mrs. Clara thought, her heart racing. She struggled to stay hidden, her mind reeling from the revelation. Just as Oluchi was about to stand up and close the container, she glanced around and her eyes widened as they locked onto Mrs. Clara, who had mistakenly made a small noise. A tense silence filled the air.